to the 30-something African unmarried childless woman. I'm in my late 30s. I have always been a high achiever. I have a great career and I'm highly educated. I attained my PhD when I was 32. I'm generally well accomplished in many aspects of my life. And in other words, I live a happy, whole, and healthy life. However, I am unmarried and do not have children. And because of this, and given the African society that I live in, I am constantly made to feel like my life is not worthy. I wondered what made my feelings of stress any less valid just because I wasn't married. This is only one of many things that I have been told over the years because of my unmarried, childless status. I have been labeled too picky, basically implying that I should have no standards, or at least very low standards, when it comes to a decision as important as picking a life partner. Just pick someone, anyone. I have been asked to tone myself down, shrink myself to conform to society's expectations of how a woman should behave. I have been told, ninafunga jam, literally translates to, I am causing a traffic jam. As if my life journey should hinder anyone else or block anyone else from walking their own path. I have been asked, sasa ukisoma hivi sana, utawaipata bwana? Meaning, if you advance so much in your education, will you ever be able to find a husband? So again, I should shrink myself and shy away from greatness so as not to intimidate men. Life is messy, beautiful, complicated. We juggle family, work, love, and its expectations, but sometimes we just need to talk about it out loud. This is that space, a place to laugh at the chaos, honor the challenges, and celebrate the wins, both big and small, where stories are shared, hearts are open, and no one is pretending. Authenticity is welcome here. So pour your tea and join me because there's a space and a seat here for every version of you. This is Conversations with Koi. Hello, and welcome to our very first episode of Conversations with Koi, a safe space for hard truths and radical vulnerability, where we have real conversations about the lives we're living. I'm your host, Dr. Koi Moraya, and I'm so delighted that you have chosen to come and share this space with me. This podcast has been sitting in my head for a very long time, since 2021 actually, and I'm so glad that it is finally becoming a reality. In truth, this podcast was born out of frustration. On October 5th, 2020, almost exactly 5 years to today, I wrote an open letter to the older, unmarried, child-free African woman. I will read you that letter shortly, and we will also post the link in the podcast description. However, what really moved me was the response that I received to this letter. When I wrote this letter and when I published it, it was honestly just a little bit of a rant out of frustration. And I wasn't expecting anything much in return from it. But it ended up having nearly 4,500 views, and I got private messages from women from all over the world, including non-African women. I had women from as far as India and the Indian diaspora saying to me, "Thank you for giving us a voice." I even had an African man reach out to me and telling me how he and his wife had experienced so much shame and stigma for being child-free. Despite the fact that they were actually struggling to conceive, no one cared about their backstory. All they ever received was shame, stigma, unkindness, and judgment. And so, dear listener, this is where the story of this podcast begins. After the response to the article, it occurred to me that for both African women and men, we lack a safe space to have authentic conversations about the difficult realities of the lives that we're living. I, for one, was just fed up with people's unkindness that they showed to women like me. I was fed up of people's opinions and judgments about our lives. But beyond discussing it with my female friends who are in similar situations to myself, there was no real space or mainstream space where we could commune and do so with honesty, vulnerability, authenticity. a place where we can pause and speak truthfully about the things we often keep hidden away. Since my years of frustration, I have journeyed into a space of a lot more softness and vulnerability. And while this has been sometimes difficult for me, especially because I generally have a strong persona, it has truly been transformative. The focus now is much less external and a lot more internal, with constant, deep introspection. I am truly in a space and a season of unearthing my soul, of welcoming vulnerability as strength and not as weakness, reconnecting with myself and embracing my authenticity in all its forms, including my perfect imperfections. A wise woman once said to me that my wounds will give healing to others. I believe this to be true, that my wounds will give healing to others. And so, my dear listener, this is my promise to you, that this podcast will be our shared safe space where we interrogate our wounds that will become the redemption for others. In this space, strength meets softness. Here, vulnerability and openness are not only welcome, they are celebrated. And so I invite you to come and journey with me as we explore and unpack our lived realities. Not the lives that society expects us to live, full of impositions and judgments and expectations, but those that we are currently existing in and experiencing with all the joys and sorrows and everything in between. This will be a space for solo reflections and deep dialogue and conversations, laughter, and maybe even some tears. If this resonates with you, find Conversations with Koi from wherever you get your podcasts from, and on YouTube for the full video episode. You can also engage with us on any of our social media platforms that will be listed in the podcast description. Before I sign off, dear listener, allow me to read you the article or the letter that started this whole journey. So when I first wrote this letter, which as I said was a few years ago, I was still in my late 30s. So I'm now in my 40s. So I just want you to keep this in mind as I read this. To the 30-something African unmarried childless woman. And I should also say that since then, I have transitioned to using the phrase child-free rather than childless, because I think childless necessarily has some negative connotation, and I don't believe people should be shamed for being child-free. So here goes. To the 30-something African unmarried childless woman. I'm in my late 30s. I have always been a high achiever. I have a great career and I'm highly educated. I attained my PhD when I was 32. I'm generally well accomplished in many aspects of my life. And in other words, I live a happy, whole, and healthy life. However, I am unmarried and do not have children. And because of this, and given the African society that I live in, I am constantly made to feel like my life is not worthy, as if my life is somehow not valid, like I'm not really living, like I will only understand what living really means once I get a husband and a child. I remember towards the end of my PhD, when life was highly stressful, an auntie ridiculing me and telling me in my native language Kikuyu that I do not know what stress is. And I will only ever understand stress when I finally get a home, meaning when I get married and I get a child, or I get a child. I was puzzled. I'd always considered myself as having a home, and one that I happen to love very much, my place of peace and solace that I could retreat to and catch my breath from the chaos of the world. But apparently, all I had was a structure that I resided in, nothing to be proud of. I wondered what made my feelings of stress any less valid just because I wasn't married. This is only one of many things that I have been told over the years because of my unmarried, childless status. I have been labeled too picky, basically implying that I should have no standards, or at least very low standards, when it comes to a decision as important as picking a life partner. Just pick someone, anyone. I have been asked to tone myself down, read shrink myself to conform to society's expectations of how a woman should behave. I have been told, ninafunga jam, literally translates to, I am causing a traffic jam. As if my life journey should hinder anyone else or block anyone else from walking their own path. I have been asked, sasa ukisoma hivi sana, utawahi pata bwana? Meaning, if you advance so much in your education, will you ever be able to find a husband? So again, I should shrink myself and shy away from greatness so as not to intimidate men. And my favorite is this one. It is of God. Marriage and children are of God. So therefore, anything that does not conform to this is ungodly. Another auntie once publicly told me in front of a whole crowd of family members, stating very loudly that she and others like her had made the godly choices, unlike me. Incidentally, at least in my case, the brunt of shaming always comes from fellow women. It is no wonder that sometimes society says women are their own worst enemies. We give society the fodder to say so. When it comes from much older women, like my aunties, as vexing as it is, I take a deep breath and I remind myself that there's a generational gap in our thinking. But when it comes from my peers, it is downright infuriating because they should know better and they should think better. I should pause here and clarify that I have absolutely nothing against marriage and motherhood. And there's even nothing wrong with desiring these things. In fact, the contrary. I believe marriage with the right partner can be a source of joy and fulfillment. And if the joy I derive from spending time with my then 10-year-old nephew is anything to go by, I have little doubt that motherhood can be an amazing experience. Whilst acknowledging the potential benefits of marriage and motherhood, I do not believe it should ever be used as a reason to belittle or stigmatize those who are living alternative lifestyles, whether by choice or by circumstance. Marriage or having children is not an achievement. It's a choice. I'll repeat that. Marriage or having children is not an achievement. It is a choice. When we belittle older women who are unmarried or have no children, what we are saying to them and other women and girls is that their sole purpose on this earth is to procreate and to be someone's wife. That they serve no greater purpose beyond this. That they should only ever aspire to be these two things, and without accomplishing these two things, they might as well not exist. I have seen women spiral into depression because they're unmarried or don't have children, because society has made them believe that they're not full women. Without these things, they feel unworthy, unlovable, and like their lives do not matter. It breaks my heart to see this. Even sadder is the stigma, trauma, and torment that women in marriages who are unable to have children experience, both at the hands of society and sometimes even at the hands of their own families. Even when the issue is with their husband or partner, they are still often blamed. I have seen women make questionable choices because any man or any husband is better than none, only to spend the next several years living in tears, frustration, and misery. I have also seen newly married women, some of them former friends, look down their noses at me, only to come seeking me out later in life when they realize that their partner was not that Prince Charming that they thought he would be, and that marriage was not the bed of roses they thought it would be. I sympathize with these women. But with women like me, society often judges us so harshly without even knowing our stories. We have stories too, and we have a voice too. Some are simply stories of choices made because one prefers one way of life over another, and that is okay too. We do not have to conform to society's expectations of us. A friend of mine once put it very brilliantly. Having children and marriage is not a need for every woman. It is an expectation that society has of us. A woman can exercise her freedom of choice and decide not to get married or have children. We all have a right to live our lives as we desire. And no, Humanity will not suddenly come to a grinding halt because some women and men decide not to have children. There will always be many women and men in society with a strong desire for children. Other times, the stories are much sadder, more traumatic. Stories of remarkable heartbreak and unimaginable losses, disappointments, perceived failures, and so much more, which can lead one to give up on the idea of marriage or motherhood. To this latter group of women, yes, I know the streets can be rough, but I give you Maya Angelou's words. Have enough courage to trust love one more time and always one more time. The difficulty with being a woman like me, an older, unmarried, childless woman, is that society does not allow us to have a voice. We are considered subaltern women. We don't even understand what true stress is, remember? So how can we even know of pain, loss, and disappointment? How about we first focus on bagging ourselves a man and popping some babies so that we can even have a right to be had? So this piece is in honor of all those unheard, voiceless women. The ones whose society mocks, judges, ridicules, and bashes us on the daily without knowing our stories. The ones who are tired. And to the rest of society, before you go telling someone anafunga jam or that they are ungodly, please consider that you know nothing of their story. And frankly, it is none of your business. It really is none of your business. So for the woman out there who I am writing this letter for, I don't know you, but I understand your struggle. I understand the exhaustion of having to survive in a judgmental and insensitive world. But understand this, you are not the problem. Whenever someone tries to put you down because of your marital or child status, remind yourself that the issue is with them, not with you. People who are happy and content with their own lives do not go around trying to bring others down. They simply don't. However, misery loves company. And my own observation is that those people who are always all up in my business are people whose lives are not going very well. And so they try to get me down because it makes them feel better about themselves and validates their life choices. I have learned to simply not pay attention to this. Your best revenge is to live your best life and to be the fullest and most authentic version of yourself. In other words, unapologetically do you, and always, always hold your head up high, because contrary to the lies that society has told you, you are truly worthy and you are truly a jewel. I hope for you all that you truly desire, whatever that is. And so with that, dear listener, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I cannot wait to see where we go with this podcast. I hope that every episode will perhaps challenge you or at least make you feel seen and or heard. Until next time, stay well and stay true to yourself.